Shalom and welcome. Temple Talk, Israel National Radio. Today, the 19th day of the month of Sivan, 5774, June 17th, 2014. The Shabbat, Shabbat Mevarchim, the Sabbath of the blessing of the new moon of the month of Tammuz, which is coming up next Shabbat. And it's, of course, Parashat Korach, the rebellion against Moshe, which is really the rebellion against the authority of Hashem himself. And of course, Yitzchak, I don't see how we could really be possibly talking about anything else, just like we're not really thinking about anything else, other than the fate, the safe return, God willing, of 3 children. Their names are Eyal Yifrach, Naftali, Frenkel, and Gilad, Sha'ar, who are in enemy hands, who have been kidnapped, and the entire nation is basically frozen completely and stuck, unable to move, unable to function. It's just like a lump in the national throat. It's just impossible really to do anything other than get by on a very minimal level of life force. We are praying around the clock. We are doing as much as we can, but basically we are at a standstill, and the suffering of the nation is very, very great. And again, how could it be otherwise? How could it be otherwise? Thinking about what these children may be facing, identifying with their parents, but also feeling each of us a close bond, that we really are one family, that they are everyone's child. And just like last week we talked about in Parashat Shalach, how all of the tragedies that befall the nation of Israel, they all stem from the destruction of the temple, which stems from the speaking against the land of Israel. We see in what's going on now a quintessential Jewish tragedy, suffering. And also, we happened to be speaking last week about this idea of making an acquisition on a soul level of the land of Israel, that everyone who lives here ultimately is paying some sort of price. I think that a lot of people do understand that. I see the faces of people. I see how secular, religious, how everyone is really truly united over this situation, and how it's impossible to respond to the simple question of how are you without saying, how could you even ask that? How could any of us be feeling anything other than this suffering? We ask the world, those that stand up for everything that's decent and good and proper and human, we ask everyone to join us in praying for the safety and the welfare and their safe return of these children. We use the Jewish tradition of praying with the mother's name, Eyal ben Iris Teshua, Yaakov Naftali ben Rachel Devora, and Gilad Michael ben Bat Galim. We ask Hashem to safeguard them and return them. And in the meantime, it's not that life goes on normally, but this is something that is also showing us a lot of other things at the same time. The way that we're reacting, the way that the world is reacting, the way the world is reacting to what our reaction is, and I don't even know where to start. I'm totally aghast. And last Friday, you and I, just hours before Shabbat, we were getting these messages and rumors, and the rumors were flying high about that there was going to be an announcement that something did happen, but that it's over and everything is safe, and it was a great victory. And unfortunately, that was a lot of misinformation that we fell prey to, that many people did, and it transpired very close to Shabbat, as Shabbat was coming in, that unfortunately this is true, this is going on now, this is unresolved, and that's how it stands now as well. So, in the meantime, as far as I know, President Obama, 5 days into the crisis, still hasn't said a word, even though, for example, the Frenkel boy, Naftali Frenkel, is an American citizen. You would think that that would mean something after they just freed 5 Al-Qaeda generals for the traitor Bergdahl and all that business.
It doesn't take them that long to respond when Israel announces that it's going to be building some apartments for Jews in Jerusalem.
Speaking of which, the European Union, which roundly denounces Israel for every balcony that is made on a kindergarten in Judea, Samaria, or even in Jerusalem, just today, the EU just issued a condemnation, and I'd like to point out that that's only following the fact that Jerusalem was very, very upset about the fact that Ashton did not say anything about the abduction of these children. And so here's the language. Such acts, and I quote, can only undermine international efforts to encourage a resumption of peace negotiations. We're constantly following developments closely and remain in constant contact with our Israeli and Palestinian counterparts. You know why this is just so sick to me? Because
it's not a condemnation of the act at all.
Right.
All it is, it means you just throw another stick in the spokes of our effort to undermine and destroy Israel diplomatically. And that was the headline
of the New York Times, was that Israel was going to be endangering the progress. Such acts, she said, can only undermine international efforts. And for example, you have the extreme, ridiculous Sky News that basically said the whole problem here is that Israel is trying to get these kids back. And what about the fact that we're talking about a monster? You have to be just completely candid about the fact that Arabs are monsters. They always were. If you don't believe me, good, b'hatzlacha. Have a good day. If you don't, you can look at the footage that's going all around the world now of ISIS, of what's happening in Iraq, of thousands of people being beheaded, and you can justify that as well. You can look at the Palestinians here in Israel that are handing out candies and that are celebrating the abduction of children. What do I say to you? Where I'm lying in bed all night, awake, listening to the firecrackers that are going off in the local villages near our home of these animals, these monsters, celebrating the fact that Jewish children were kidnapped. You have an Arab Knesset member, Hanin Zoabi, who just today in an interview said that these kidnappers are not terrorists. They're frustrated. They're frustrated with the occupation, and it's a last resort. This is a member of Knesset, democratically elected representative, sitting and being paid by Israel, a lawmaker who is justifying and lauding the most horrible thing in the world, which is to take someone's children and who knows what. I don't want to say what they might do to them. Do you understand what we're facing here? So a couple days later, John Kerry, he said it was a despicable act of terrorism. But of course, it's only the pressure of John Kerry that led to it, because of the fact that we were forced to free all of these prisoners. Not that I'm blaming him, because it's only our fault, and that's what Parashat Korach is all about. It's about only believing in Hashem and not being on a bandwagon of grandstanding and self-aggrandizing and ego and promoting one's own agenda. It's about believing that the authority comes from Hashem, and that was the difference between Korach and Moshe, and that's what we need in our government as well. And on it goes. So we could be very upset about, and we could count and keep a close record of what nation at what time on which day said what. But it doesn't matter. It's all the same. It's all empty. It's all ridiculous. They're just Jews, and not only are they just Jews, but they're Jewish children. They were not IDF soldiers, as if that could be justified. But they were children coming home from school, and you have someone like the Secretary General of the United Nations, Ban Ki-moon, who urged Israel to be careful, who urged Israel's restraints. You have someone like Abbas, who basically at the same time that he issued some ridiculous condemnation that always talks about the escalation on both sides and how he's against anything that could damage his people's chance for statehood, he also accuses Israel of terrorism. And all the lead headlines on CNN, if you can find one, because everyone's busy with the World Cup and with Casey Kasem's death and everything else, all the world headlines are leading with the fact that Israel has rounded up 150, prisoners, and that Israel is conducting these things at night, and that Israel is escalating, and all these unbelievable headlines. And you know what? There's nothing new here. I'm used to all of that. Just like, the whole question, who was it? Was it Hamas? Was it Al-Qaeda? Was it Fatah? It's absolutely all the same. Anyone who lives here and who walks the streets knows that it's absolutely all the same. The ones that give out the candy, the ones that eat the candy, the ones that take the children, the ones that are in support of taking the children, which is unanimous in the Palestinian street, it's absolutely all the same. So either we believe in Hashem, we believe that this is our land, we believe, like President-elect Ruby Rivlin said when he visited the yeshiva where these kids study, that in answer to a question, no, of course we can't stop hitchhiking, because of course we don't have to be afraid in our own land. And by the way, the only way to reach many of these places, because there isn't adequate bus services, by hitchhiking, which is a time-honored convention here in Israel, because we are nice people, because we live in a society where people help each other. So of course people stop and pick people up. And of course you don't blame the victim. That is twisted, to blame the victim. We're trying to live a normal life here, but the whole world is so completely twisted and out of touch with what this monstrous demon is. But you'll find out. You are finding out. You look at what's going on in Iraq. Look what's going to be happening in America. You're finding out, but you're in denial. You're in complete denial, because it's coming from the highest office in the land, that you have to be in denial, and that you have to be whatever you want to call it, pluralistic, liberal, whatever it is. The point is, it's all coming down, and we're the ones who've been telling you, and we're the ones who know all about it. And this is not a normal situation to be in, where we have to justify and explain and twist headlines about what the Israelis are doing. It's about children that were taken from their families. Who does that? That is a immediate death sentence. Someone who would touch a child. Where are you? Like, what kind of thing is this, that we're even having this conversation? Isn't it obvious? What would happen if someone kidnapped Abbas's children? If someone kidnapped Ban Ki-moon's children? I'm completely in favor of that, by the way. And this Facebook page that everyone is worried about. There's a Facebook page that went up in Israel that is calling for the execution of a terrorist every hour that the children are not returned, and it's got like 25,000 likes in a few hours. And people say, "Ooh, oh my goodness, that's not Jewish." First of all, it's very, very Jewish, because Hashem calls for the revenge of His honor. Second of all, this is exactly what King David would do. And every village in which there are collaborators, and in which there's the remotest suspicion of any cooperation, should be completely leveled. And that's what Jews always did, and that's what we should be doing. But I don't think that's enough. I think that maybe we should go over to some Arabs in the street and say, maybe we should kidnap you. Maybe we should kidnap your children. What would you think then? And how our society could be insensitive to this at times, when we are lulled into some sort of state of complacency, and people get into Arab taxis, and people hire Arabs, and people have Arabs working on their homes and things like that. I never could understand that, and I still don't. Not because I hate Arabs, but because I love Jews, and because I think that Jews have to help each other. I think that that's what we're here for. I think that this is supposed to be a Jewish land, and we're all for granting civil rights to the Arabs and the land of Israel. And when the temple is standing, it's a house of prayer for all nations. And that's the vision. And I can't stand, and I hate myself when I talk like this, and I get so defensive, and I get so insular, and I say that we shouldn't be dealing with them. But you know what? Can you trust them? Does a Jew kidnap children? And I'm saying, completely facetiously, we should go over to them and say, how would you like it if we kidnap you? Are we capable of doing anything like that, of thinking a thought like that? Of course not. Of course not. And what's going on the Temple Mount now, where Hamas is basically ruling the Temple Mount, and we turned a blind eye, and the government is so concerned with the holy status quo. Where do you think this is all coming from? When the temple stands, it's a house of prayer for all nations. And because we do not support that, and because we do not, as a nation, no, I take that back, because as a nation we do, but because we have not yet merited to a leadership that is afraid of Hashem and that recognizes Hashem's sovereignty, which is the emphasis of this week's Torah portion, that's the situation that we're in right now. And so what difference does it make? Yes, Kerry, you could blame him. He's the one who put pressure on Israel to release 1,000 people, 1,000 monsters. And what do you expect? And yes, Obama hasn't said a word yet, even though, Naftali Frenkel is a dual citizen. Do I care? Do I care what Obama thinks? And yes, maybe it's Hamas, maybe it's Fatah, and all of this is just totally immaterial to the fact that we have a revelation in the strength of who we are as a people, that we are one family, and that we should basically say to the whole world, you know what, it's really been fun. Actually, it hasn't been fun at all, but enough is enough. So just all of you, that's it. I'm closing the door, and we'll do what we have to do. But of course, I'm not prime minister, but I know who should be. And the fact is, who cares? Who cares about Jewish children? Not apparently the world, not the governments, not the EU, not America, not the headlines. Who cares? So who cares but us? Who cares but us?
If we don't care, nobody cares. But the expressions of solidarity in the country have been tremendous, and the outpouring of concern and prayer, which has swept the country up from left to right, from to religious to not religious, and everything in between. There is tremendous unity right now. Of course, we long for this kind of unity in good times, but in bad times, we're witness to it, and it shows our strength, and it radiates our strength. And with that strength, we need to move forward. It don't come easy, Rabbi. It don't come easy here in the land of Israel.
This is exactly what we were saying last week. It doesn't come easy, and everybody pays a price. But like you were saying earlier to me, it's like the parents of these children. What were you saying?
The press, of course, is outside their houses, and they're being visited by members of Knesset and all sorts of important personalities in society, as well as people who are unknown to other people. They're being surrounded with tremendous support and love, and they come out of their house on occasion, of each of the three families, the parents, and make a statement to the press, to the people, and they radiate and express such strength, such complete emunah, faith in Hashem, and such complete thanks to the people for the strength that they feel from the nation. And of course, the nation is getting the strength from their incredible fortitude
because
when
a person in a situation like they're in, which is not enviable, they realize that Hashem is using them also to broadcast something to their people, and that's what's going on with the people of Israel. That we are completely like one family. In the meantime, there's a law in America on the books that Congress passed that Hamas is a terrorist organization and they're not allowed to have anything to do with them. But yet the Obama administration basically welcomed cautiously the Hamas-Fatah unity. Again, an American citizen has been kidnapped. Not a word from that total train wreck, moron, imposter, absolute despotic agent of some sort of evil agenda to destroy America. Not a word from him. Not a single solitary word. Who cares? Who cares about him? Who cares about Europe? Who cares about the UN? Either it's time. You know what the happiest moment of my life, I remember when I was a kid, July 4th, 1976. How old was I? 15, 16?
Entebbe, yeah.
16. I remember hearing that news about what Israel did in Entebbe and how amazing that was.
Yeah.
You know what? We're capable of doing these things. We are really capable of doing all sorts of things. The question is if we will do them or not. We're capable of doing anything. And may this be an opportunity to do much, much more.
There are so many people here in Israel who certainly weren't born in 1976 and are so amazed at what the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, are doing now in their sweep across Judea and Samaria,
because our
arresting and
kids,
searching.
Lately the army hasn't been allowed to do anything. But you and I, even 20 years ago, when we were in the army, we were involved with some more serious things. We were
for
allowed
anybody
to do
who's younger
things.
than us, for the younger generation, they're astonished by all this, and I'd like to say to them, well, good morning already. This is the way we're supposed to be, and this is the way it used to be. So maybe, perhaps, there is some kind of silver lining here that we're returning to ourselves once again.
Again, there's nothing to say about the kidnapping of children, except that it should be an immediate death sentence for anyone remotely involved, and that's where we are right now. And so we ask Hashem to protect, safeguard, safely return to us these 3 children, and there's nothing else to say. There's nothing else that we could possibly talk about. We will talk about more things, but everything is completely contorted and colored by this stifling gasp of anguish that we feel, of just that we are not ourselves. We are not feeling well. We are feeling desperately ill and concerned and absolutely in anguish over our children. We're not capable of living normal lives for one moment while this is going on, and that's it. Either a person gets that or doesn't. Either feels it or doesn't.
I don't know if everybody can grasp that, but definitely here in Israel, this incident, and I don't even want to call it a tragedy, because God willing, things
Their
will...
separation from their families is already enough of a tragedy.
It's a knife to the heart, a knife to the heart.
Temple Talk, Israel National Radio. We'll be right back.
Shalom and welcome back to Temple Talk, Israel National Radio. Today, the 19th day of the month of Sivan, 5774, 17th day of June, 2014. This coming Shabbat, Parashat Korach, and this coming Shabbat, as Rabbi mentioned earlier, also Shabbat Mevarchin, the Shabbat leading up to the new moon, the first day of the upcoming month of Tammuz. So we always make a special blessing in the synagogue on the Shabbat that precedes the new month. And before we go on, I would like to again mention the names of the 3 boys who have been kidnapped. 2 of the boys are 16 years old, 1 is 19 years old. And their names are Eyal ben Iris Teshura, Yaakov Naftali ben Rachel Devora, and Gilad Michael ben Bat Galim. And of course our prayers are with the boys for their speedy and safe return, that not a hair should be harmed on their heads. And of course we invite everybody who has a heart to join in our prayers. And if you just mention the name of the person who you're praying for, it's very powerful, even if you don't know what else to say. So, which is why we are repeating their names. So I hope you've been able to write them down. I was again Eyal Yaakov Naftali and Gilad Michael that they should return soon to their homes, to their parents, to the nation that awaits them and loves them. Rabbi, we had some exciting news which we shared with the world last week, which, you know, in the light of the ongoing situation here, you know, pales a bit, but that was the footage that we have of Red Heifer, which was born 5 months ago, and you and I were actually notified of it a month and a half ago, maybe, and we were able to get footage of this very beautiful animal, and we've made a video which is on YouTube, which has generated a considerable amount of excitement. Since we posted it Thursday evening, it has received over 40,000 views. And of course, as we stress in the video, a red heifer in and of itself is nothing supernatural. It's nothing, you know, that bespeaks of miracles or anything else. It's a natural occurrence that it will remain...
Albeit a perfect red heifer is not that
Albeit
common.
A perfect red heifer is very rare, and that it should remain a perfect red heifer for the next 2 years, at which point it would be the time to
utilize
it. That is something which we have to see. It has to be cared for very, very carefully and specifically, and the people who are the owners of the red heifer who brought it to our attention are taking it very, very, very seriously, and I think have learned what they need to know in order to take proper care of the animal.
And people have been asking us, they've been saying, what's next? Because some people that have more of an in-depth knowledge of this very complex part of Torah law, they know that it's not so simple, even if you have a red heifer, to reinstitute purity, because who's going to attend to it? How is it going to be done exactly? And I refer here, of course, to something written in the 3rd chapter of Tractate Parah that talks about the practice that was in place in the time of the Second Temple, and the children that were raised especially for the purpose of dealing with the red heifer. There's a few things that need to be said. One is that, like you began to mention, there are red heifers throughout the world, and occasionally we are involved and notified of it. We like to keep abreast of this. There have been some red heifers born in Israel recently. This one happens to be abroad right now. When it does happen, it's always very exciting because it's seen as some sort of a wake-up call, some sort of indicator, because everybody knows, or if you don't, you should know that according to the Rambam's Maimonides' explanation of commentary on the Mishnah in Tractate Parah, he talks about how there were 9 throughout. The Mishnah talks about how there were 9 specific red heifers, parot adumot, throughout Jewish history, which were adequate to furnish the ashes for the purification process throughout all the generations, and that the 10th one, the Rambam says, is associated with the time of Mashiach. So this is seen as something very special if there is a red heifer in the world. But all the logistical questions people are asking: how are we going to get a hold of it, and what's going to happen exactly, and how are we going to process it, and how is it going to be done? And yes, there's a lot of issues that have to be resolved, and we're not saying that this is the one or that it's going to be immediate or anything like that, because many factors have to be in place and many ducks have to be in a row together in order for this to happen. But what we can say is a few things. One is that it's a very good sign, indeed. 2, there is a very good chance that we could obtain this cow. 3, it's very wonderful and encouraging and inspiring to see how seriously people take this, how inspired they are. And for example, the family that's raising this calf there, this heifer there, very, very staunch believers in Hashem, and very great supporters of Israel, and to them it's like the greatest thing in the world that this was born, and they're very dedicated to do whatever they have to do to make sure that we get this heifer. That's an amazing thing in itself. So there's a lot going on. It's a learning curve, a learning process, And it's just another, I think, very strong indication of the fact that all roads lead to the Holy Temple. That's something that we're getting very strongly now every day. There's never been a period in time since Jerusalem was unified in 1967. There's never been a time like this one, and I'm talking about the last few months, the last year, every year that goes by. But now there's never been a time wherein there has been such a constant focus in Israeli society on the Temple Mount and the Temple. It's become something else altogether than it ever was. It's become more than just legitimate public discourse, which, by the way, it never was legitimate public discourse all those years. It was in the beginning of our time, for example, when I first began going up in the Temple Mount and became involved with the Temple Institute, which was when I joined it, only a year old, back in like 87. You know what? It was completely taboo to even talk about. And now, not only are there members of Knesset that are advancing the cause of Jewish prayer on the Temple Mount, and and not only is there a minister in the government of Israel that openly calls for the building of the temple, and not only has the Temple Institute, for example, made incredible inroads educationally with its curriculum and its publications and its awareness and its activism, but there are also secular Israelis, like student groups, that are going up on the Temple Mount. There's a viral video that a group of kids just made. In fact, I was there the day that they filmed it, and their whole goal is just to get people excited about the Temple Mount, and they're not even necessarily all religious. When did that ever happen before? It's because it's becoming clear, abundantly clear to our society that this is exactly what is missing, and this is exactly the key. And that is just so encouraging. And that's what the red heifer is really all about. The red heifer is also a source of tremendous encouragement. And when we talked about the red heifer in the time of Parashat Korach, back before Passover, and it's coming up again now. Parashat Korach is coming up in a couple of weeks. We recall that one of the greatest secrets of the enigma of the red heifer is the fact that this is the vehicle by which God determined that Israel can be purified. And the secret of the red heifer is that we really don't understand how it works. And here we are, so sophisticated, people that have answers for everything, people that have the greatest technology, being forced to say, well, I can't explain it, because that's what Hashem tells us. He says, you do not understand how the red heifer works. So the red heifer is itself a lesson in total humility and subservience to a greater power, to Hashem. And that itself
purifies.
Is the secret to purity, right? The fact that, and by the way, that's part of the mystique of Korach. Is it one of the most beautiful Hasidic interpretations of the connection between this week's Torah portion, Parashat Korach, and the following, which is Parashat Chukat, is as follows. Because you see, Parashat Chukat, Numbers 19, starts talking about the red heifer, but that's not its natural place, because the mitzvah of the red heifer was actually, according to tradition, given back in a place called Mara, back in Egypt, back on the way out from Egypt, where the water was sweetened. That's like in Exodus, what is it, somewhere between Exodus 15 and 17. I don't have it in front of me right now, man, but the point is, back there, that's where the mitzvah was given. So then, but because we know that there isn't necessarily any chronological order in the Torah, ein mukdam u'muchar b'Torah, because it's not a history book, it's Hashem's book. So it came out here. This is where Hashem wanted it. So one of the beautiful interpretations of why Parashat Chukat appears after Korach is because basically Hashem was saying to Korach, you had these issues with Moshe, like you didn't understand, like why him and not you? You didn't understand? This is why. Because Moshe understood this, and you
never
couldn't and never would, never could. Why? Because you, Korach, looked at Moshe and you saw this person of all these different kind of energies, like different hats that he wore. He's the prophet, he's the leader, he's a Levite, he's the king, and yet he's the humblest man of all. And you said about yourself, well, how could he be like that? If it was me, I would be like really strutting my feathers. How could a person have so many different hats to wear? And Hashem was basically saying to him, this is why, because he's capable of understanding the secret of the paraduma, because the only person that can understand that is someone who has absolutely zero ego, who has no aleph in his ani, who has no sense of self, who could say, blot me out. I don't even want to have ever existed if it's not for your people. And what am I? And so that's part of the secret of the red heifer. And you know, getting back to the thing that's on all of our minds, getting back to the thing that's stopping us from taking deep breaths, and that is basically the only thing on our minds now, the boys. I see so much of this connected with what's going on here also now, because I think that this is also a lesson in purity. It's also a lesson in humility. It's also, it's in itself the opposite of ego, for us to realize that we really don't understand anything, but that everything that Hashem, you know, affects is something that is beyond us. That's one thing. The other thing is this whole idea of how the secret of Israel's purity is Israel's humility. And you know, when you look at the nation, how united it is, and how embracing it is of itself and each other, you get this feeling of a very deep level of purity, which exists so close to the surface all the time, and the problems in our society are not with the people, and that's just something that we have to remind ourselves of all the time. I was getting angry earlier, and I was saying, oh, you know, it's like we have like a sick society. We don't have a sick society. We might have leadership that is completely disconnected from Hashem. We might have a lot of mistakes about conceptions and that's why we allow situations to become what they are. That's why we allow Arab Knesset members who undermine Israel from within and who could laud something like this, and that's why we allow ourselves to be deluded into thinking that we could have peace with monsters that would abduct our children and then give out candy to each other and celebrate our suffering and loss, and think that these people are normal and that we could possibly have a normal life with them. That's sick. But the people of Israel are very, very together and very, very healthy and very, very connected. And God willing, we should come out of this purified. We should come out of this wiser. We should come out of this, and first and foremost, the children should be safe at home with their families. But we should come out of this determined that we won't get fooled again, and that we don't care what anyone thinks. We don't care. I don't need to count the days. How long did it take for Obama to say something? May his name be obliterated. I don't care if he ever says anything. I'd rather that he just shut up. How long did it take the EU, Ashton, to say something? And how long did it take Abbas to say, oh God, how long did it take Abbas to say, well, his wife is lying in Asuta Hospital in Tel Aviv, where she just had a pricey private operation, you know, because of course he might be part of the Hamas government, but to send his wife to a private Israeli hospital, why didn't they straighten her legs cosmetically in Gaza? How long did it take Kerry to say that it was a despicable act of terrorism? Kerry, who forced Israel's hand to release over 1,000 bloodthirsty murderers. Why do we have Palestinian prisoners in prison in the first place? Remember? Because they murdered us. Who cares about any of them? It's really time for us to take the ashes of the red heifer and sprinkle it on ourselves and come out of the trance that we're in, thinking that we could possibly have a normal life with these monsters in our midst, and that we could possibly have a normal life having to justify ourselves, having to live up to the world standards. The world standards are that we should cease to exist. And that's why the New York Times can lead with a headline about how Israel is plunging, is endangering the situation with escalation, and how all these other media outlets could be talking about what we're doing and how we rounded up 150 Hamas and this and that, but not really talking about the fact that Jewish children were taken by monsters towards who knows what fate. Yes, when you can find it buried in CNN, then you can find that they were taken from a Jewish settlement, that they're settlers. And all this kind of claptrap, which is designed to demonize and delegitimize Jewish existence and make it sound as if this is all totally reasonable and understandable and justifiable.
And again, I don't know if we've pointed out, you mentioned that the 1,000 bloodthirsty murderers were released a year ago because of the strong arming of Kerry representing the United States government, that the stated purpose of these kidnappings is to force Israel's hand to release more bloodthirsty terrorists. That's why they do it. That's why they applaud these things, because they can now hope on getting their husbands and fathers and cousins and uncles, loved ones out of the Israeli prisons and back on the street to murder and kidnap more Jews. Yesterday I heard the father of Gilad, Sha'ar, speaking to the press, of course, telling his son to stay strong and longing for the day when he can embrace him and cover him with his talit, and they can hear Birkat Kohanim together again. The blessing of the priestly blessing, which takes place here in Israel every morning in the tefillah, in the morning service. And again, of course, the priestly blessing harkens back to the Holy Temple. It is, you can't say it enough, it's the heart, it's the soul, it's the life force, it's the energy, it's the raison d'etre, it's everything for the Jewish people. And as the Israeli army is searching in every hole, in every cave, in every shack that dots Judea and Samaria, and is arresting Hamas activists, operatives, leaders, politicians, I don't know what, searching for the three boys, we have to remind ourselves, and especially our government, that the real searching we need to do and the real cleaning up we need to do is on the Temple Mount, the place of the Holy Temple, because that is the heart and the soul of the nation. And from there, if we can clean that of all the filth and all the hatred and all the sickness that has metastasized there over the past years, then we can begin to really bring this nation back to health, and the strength and health and beauty and purity that will come from that spot will emanate throughout every part of the land. And those that live here will never dare again to kidnap or to even touch a Jewish child on his way home from school or on his way to school, or anybody here in the land of Israel, because we will show with ourselves, with our presence on the Temple Mount, that we belong everywhere in this land, that this land belongs to us, and that it's over for those who think they can dislodge us from this place.
In the meantime, thanks to John Kerry, thanks to the Obama administration, and thanks to our own government's ineptitude, not one of us is safe as long as they think that they can get away with this. The priestly blessing that you mentioned, which emanates from the Holy Temple, is all about peace. That's the irony. It's all about, may Hashem grant us peace. That's all we want. But this ridiculous, quote-unquote, peace that's being dictated to us at all costs, look at Fatah's political cartoon that they published. You can look it up on the internet. It mocks the kidnapped children and portrays them as three rats that are being held on strings or something like that. This is the Palestinian government that we're supposed to be dealing with. This is our peace partners. It's so ridiculous for anyone to think that they could possibly dictate any terms to us in dealing with this incredible monster in our midst. And so who cares? Was it Fatah? Was it Hamas? Who cares who condemned it? Who cares about any of you? About any of you in the world? There's no one at home in your lobotomized brains thinking your fantasies about what the world is. We know exactly what the world is, and we know exactly at what cost we have to pay to be Jews in the land of Israel. And I think that we're willing to pay that price. But let's start doing what we have to do and acting the way Hashem would have us act.
Rabbi, I'd like to once again mention the names of the three boys. Eyal ben Iris Teshura, Yaakov Naftali ben Rachel Devora. I believe Yaakov Naftali is the American citizen as well.
Correct.
And Gilad Michael ben Bat Galim. Once again, we, as with all Israel, and I'm sure all good and decent, God-fearing people around the world, are praying for their quick return, healthy and sound of mind and spirit, to their families and to the nation of Israel. And God willing, by next week's broadcast,
we should have very good news.
We should have already received very good news. And
never underestimate the power of prayer. Like you said earlier, just mentioning their names and just beaming positivity and telling Hashem that you want to be included in the side of good, that counts for a lot. And that's what it's coming down to. You're going to have to stand up for good, because it's otherwise these monsters are going to take over the entire world.
Thank you for being with us. This has been Temple Talk.